screen. Okay. And so welcome everyone. What we're going to do today is attend the last session in our Accessibility March Madness here this spring semester. We're going to talk about VPATs today, and we'll get into, what does VPAT stand for? Why should you be asking for it? And when should you be asking for it? Because you don't always need a VPAT. And also, once you have that VPAT, or ACR that you've asked for, what do you do with it? So we'll go through some of the basics of that. We can really delve in deep with it. So I'm going to try to go through and have it be from a complete beginner's lens. But if you have any questions as we go along, let me know. I will also recommend the DQ University trainings that everybody should be getting the login in the next week or two. I just wanted to make sure we had all these videos done and up and recorded with captioning before I sent out the login for everybody for DQ, but there are training modules in there about VPATs and about a lot of the other terminology we're going to talk about today. So in the DQ University, you can poke in and click around and take a look, as well as there's other different resources that I have listed at the end of the presentation. I am going to share out to you all as well the link to the PowerPoint that we're using today. So if you wanted to save the link so you have it on your own computer, that should be saved right there for you as well. I uploaded that to Google Docs. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is part of our SUNY EIT initiative and a huge component of EIT. So our electronic and information technology is the procurement or purchasing of electronic information and technology resources for the college. So the big standard is requesting a VPAT when going through the procurement process for certain items. So let's take a look at that. So what does VPAT stand for? So VPAT stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. So the VPAT itself is the beginning stage. It's a template, and it's a template that's created by the ICT, and there's a couple different versions of a VPAT. There's 4 different versions depending on what you're asking for, where you are. There is one specifically for the EU, so for Europe, so we wouldn't deal with that, but there are specific VPAT templates that companies will follow if it's a web product, if it is a software, if it is an app or a device. There's a couple different types of VPATs as well, because the VPAT, essentially, if you're an instructor, it's kind of like the rubric that they have to follow. It's the template that they have to follow and fill out to give information to the buyer. So you never have to fill out a VPAT here at the college. You're not selling a product. The VPAT is for you as the buyer to use to find out information about that software or hardware that you're purchasing on behalf of the college to make sure it's accessible. So in short, what is a VPAT or the ACR? It's an explanation of the accessibility of the product. So it goes through different standards in a rubric, letting you know whether or not it meets certain accessibility standards. And, the big thing is going to be for our customers, community members, and mainly students, but it can also be staff as well. If they need to use a specific type of software to have access to read or navigate within a product or software program, especially if someone cannot see, that's going to be the main component. If someone cannot visually or physically use a mouse to move around what most people just standardly how products come out, we need to have workarounds. So whether that's going to be someone just uses a keyboard, or someone cannot see the screen, how are they going to be able to navigate around that product? That's really one of the main things this testing is for, but there's a lot of other things we do testing for, but if that gives you a little bit of a background as to why we might be doing testing.
Caitlin,
yeah, go ahead, John.
Would there be a VPAT for, I guess, non-software product that the college would purchase? Or do you know an example of one?
So yes, I'll go through, there's a list of stuff that, commonly we might want to ask for products for, but there can be, depending on the type of like an app on a phone that we might use, or sometimes phones, computers will use VPATs. Pretty much anything that's electronic, we really don't need a VPAT on, you know, a chair, you know, something like that. You don't need a VPAT for that. It's really, for the most part, going to be something that it's for a piece of software 99% of the time.
Okay.
But it's most electronic stuff. I think Jesse has a really good handle on it if he's doing the purchasing, but really if it's a group of people, and the thing with EIT we want to focus on is, you know, outside of OIT, if someone is, like a faculty member who's picking a software program to use in their class, they're the only ones evaluating that program, and they might not know to check for certain things. And I've had some students in accessibility services that can't navigate through their math homework or through their psychology, you know, test, because it's not accessible and they cannot navigate through with the keyboard. So then, you know, as a college, we're expending resources to, you know, make that a more accessible environment for that student, but they're truly not getting the same experience as any other person. And that's not really in the spirit of the ADA, you know, to give equal access. If there was another comparable product that, you know, the faculty member could have picked instead. And the same thing I can adjust and fill in with maybe a software program that we're using in records or in the cashier's office, whatever that may be. We want to make sure when we go through the procurement process, we're picking the best product possible, and accessibility is one of those things, not just features and not just the end dollar amount. Obviously those are very important, but we really need to look at accessibility, because sometimes on the off end, it's actually cheaper to go with the more expensive product that's more accessible, because the college won't be expending more expenses to kind of adjust, or, you know, having a whole staff member dedicated to making this item accessible or doing workarounds.
So,
go ahead.
You know, Barnes and Noble, we have a lot of digital course materials and so forth. Do their products that they offer, typically, do they have to go through a VPAT process?
So right now they don't have to. And the thing is, Barnes and Noble offers what the instructor tells them to offer. So I know you and I had a conversation, John, about how, you know, I'm going to reach out to the division chairs and talk to them, and you know, have specific trainings for faculty on picking those resources. I know Donna Simiel has, you know, she has done some informational talks before about picking, you know, resources for the classroom and making sure they're accessible. But we definitely, just like we haven't, this is the first VPAT training we've probably done at the college period, and discussing what it is. You know, faculty members probably don't truly understand and know enough about it, and you don't know what you don't know. So that's something that we're going to work on, you know, going through with faculty, especially the big ones that are used in majority of classes. Like my math labs, for example, is used in most of the math classes, or, you know, a lot of Pearson products are used for things. So what is accessible and what is not? And something I'll talk about too, we're never going to have a perfect product. So what can we live with, and what are the workarounds, is part of it too. And just being prepared for the workarounds. A VPAT's never going to be perfect. And products, as we know, always update and change. So it's something that, you know, we have to work on. Okay. So, you know, a VPAT is the template. It's not the actual audit. The end product, and I'll show you, is actually an ACR, so the accessibility compliance report, but you use the VPAT to complete, or the template to complete, you know, that audit. So they use them interchangeably though. So if you say VPAT or ACR, people essentially mean the same thing, but I just want you all to know that VPAT's technically just the template. Once it's filled out by a company or third party, then that's, you know, really the use product that you will be looking for. And so what we're trying to do is maintain the best compliance with Section 508, which is like the ADA, but for technology, providing access, you know, online or via software. And the big thing to note too is it's not just for web products, as I've mentioned, and it's not always accurate. So there are things when you go through and, you know, you'll get your VPAT, and you'll get access to demo version of the product you're looking at. you want to test it out. You know, don't just take their word for it, because a lot of times the company's filling it out. You want to test to make sure what they're saying, it does. Okay, this would be an example of really what it looks like. So there's going to be the standards on the left-hand side, and really what you want to pay attention to on it is if it meets or doesn't meet the different indicators and what the explanations are. And I'll go through kind of red flags to look out for on this, because no one's going to be an expert on this. You know, I know a lot on it, but I'm not 100% an expert on VPATs. It is, and every single product is different. So if you have a product that really the student needs to just log on and view information, that's one thing. If there's going to be videos on it, then you would want to pay attention to what the accessibility features are for videos. But if there's no videos for that product, you really don't have to worry about things like closed captioning there, you know, things like that. So it really depends on the product. You know, how filled out certain sections might be of this template or not, depending on what you want that product to do. So like I said, you have your template, and then your ACR is your accessibility compliance report. That's the end product that you want to look for, but typically people call them VPATs because it is a filled out VPAT. So again, you can use them interchangeably, but I just wanted everyone to be aware that there's basically two terms, and really your end goal is that ACR. Okay. And so this is what it looks like. You have your template plus the testing for accessibility, and the end product is the buyer requesting that during the procurement process requesting that ACR. Well, now that you know to ask for it, so that's step one, because I think we aren't necessarily always asking for a VPAT. What do you do with that VPAT? So the big thing I want to put home first with everyone is to ask for it. If we can start getting everybody to ask for it, it's something we're used to and realize is a step of the process. And we realize that part of the process too is teaching people how to read them, but you might only ever go through the approval process to get a certain type of software once. So we don't expect everybody to be an expert. So there's help too, and we'll walk you through that process. So what type of products that you may be purchasing, as I've mentioned before, it can be web products. Think of banner web, think of banner production, think of, you know, we're switching over to our new LMS Brightspace, both Brightspace and Blackboard, Starfish. As I've mentioned, the software programs used in classes, our web page is one, any apps or any other things, you know, we use Call 'em all or Text 'em all, you know, to send out messages to students. Anything that's electronic is a VPAT. And it's not just web-based stuff, it's also software programs or, you know, the operating systems as well. Some operating systems are have certain accessibility features, and others have other accessibility features. But it could even be a photocopier. If someone, I have a printer here that actually talks to me, and I'll actually verbally say the direction. So if I could learn how to use that printer, you know, by just hearing what it's saying. But if I didn't have full sight or could read the labels, how would I learn or access or be able to utilize that, you know, the directions for it, or from my computer being able to print something out, you know? So we wouldn't think necessarily a photocopier, but things like that you have to use. If someone has to navigate using a screen reader or using keyboard commands, can they utilize that product? So main focus is outward student facing items, but there is concern though too if we ever have staff members that need you know, adjustments. Are those accessible products that staff member can still do their job? So that's something to think about as well. So what information is on that template? So it's always going to have the title of what it is, the name of the product, and what version. As we know, you really want to pay attention to the version for things. The main description, contact information, notes. Big thing to look on for this is the evaluation methods used, you know, and who tested it. Take a look. Was it completed by the actual company themselves, or did they hire a third-party company to do the evaluation? Obviously, we know there's going to be some bias potentially if the company themselves is filling it out. And at the company, who filled it out? Is it just some random person, or is it a very technical person at the company who actually is knowledgeable, in which case that might be a perfectly fine person to be going through and doing the VPAT and has a great level of knowledge to do this. But if they just have a random person filling out a VPAT who has no knowledge of accessibility, they probably just filled in the blanks or put NAs for stuff not applicable. So that's something to keep in mind. And also the evaluation methods, did they just use one type of screen reader? Did they just test it against one type of product? Did they test, how did they test it? You can do a very easy test, or you could do a very thorough test. So taking a look at what they say there and being a good judge of care, good judge of, is that the best method for the product I'm looking at? You might just need a very simple test for the product or the software program you're looking at, or you might need very extensive. Is this product going to be something that every single student on campus uses, like our LMS system? Then that's something we really want to make sure is really thoroughly vetted. Is it something that might be used occasionally? Yes, we want to vet it still, but to what degree do we need every single feature, and do we need to be as worried about it? So there is some level of gray area there. Ideally, we want everything to be the best grades and be as accessible as possible, but that's not always possible. And then at the bottom, there's tables and standards for each guideline. So especially for web-based ones, you're going to be evaluated with WCAG, which is the Web Accessibility Guidelines. That's what our website has to comply with. But also the same guidelines are used for anything that's got a web component or really has software components. It's things I mentioned. There might be color contrast, closed captioning. Can you tab and navigate if you were using a screen reader? How's the navigation around to the different pages? Are there descriptions of pictures? So someone, if there's a really important picture or graphic that's on that page and that student needs to learn about that, is there an alternative format of that where there's a description so they don't necessarily have to visibly see the picture? There's a description about what the main information they need to know in that picture is there. So there's a whole host of lists of things you would want to just double check and see, or components of that product. So red flags for VPATs, really what to look out for. Those are going to be, cells without content. So is that template just empty in a lot of places and nothing's filled out, or you have NA or not applicable listed? So NA is okay. If you see not applicable a lot, that's going to raise a red flag. Or if you see non-applicable, we're buying, let's say, a video platform and it's all about videos and they have NA listed for closed captionings or anything related to videos, that's a red flag. The common sense stuff, if that software program should be showing these different things, it's a red flag if they either don't say that they're meeting those compliance or there's NA or nothing listed there. So it's kind of, I know it's weird that it's not just black and white, but you have to look at the product you're evaluating and then say what is reasonable and what really do I need to have this meet, and does the company meet it? You want to look at the different levels that it's meeting as well. Is it meeting an A level, AA level, AAA level? How old is this VPAT? Is this a product that gets updated every 3 months and their VPAT is, 2 years old? Then that's not an updated VPAT. As we know, a lot of software programs with their updates, their bugs, they may even change the whole way the system looks. That's an old VPAT. That's really for a different product, basically. So you really want to take a look at a couple of those things there. I have it all listed. I'm not going to go through and read everything because the PowerPoint's going to be a really good reference when you are sitting down and looking at a VPAT there. So if I have red flags, what do I do about it? The thing is, you ask questions, question the company. So ask them, this is 2 years old. Why hasn't it been updated? I know your product gets updates all the time. Why haven't you updated your VPAT? If it's filled out internally, why did you choose to fill it out internally and not have a third party do it? Why did you only test with like Windows computers, but you didn't do an accessibility test on Macs and see if you can navigate well on a Mac computer. You know, if there's something missing or they have something listed on there, like accessibility feature for this category is forthcoming, ask them when they plan to complete it, what's their timeline, and how are they getting there. That may be okay. We may choose to go with a product that they say, we're not accessible now, but 3 months from now, like when the semester is going to begin or very close, we will have that accessibility feature in place. So you have to just, and then you want to set a reminder, if you've purchased that product, you need to check back in with that company in 3 months. If they said they're going to have that feature, make sure it's written into the contract that they need to have and they promise to have that accessibility feature, because you don't want to sign a 3-5 year contract with a company and then the entire time we have them, they're not compliant and you're stuck with a product, you know. So it's something that you could work with the business office or whoever, you know, to write in, have that be part of the contract that they promise to have this done by this date. So there's different things you can do to kind of have teeth with that to make sure that you get that accessibility component that you want to have. Okay, what does a good VPAT look like? So there's explanations in almost all of the criteria. You're going to have words such as it supports or partially supports, does not support, not applicable. If you really have thorough descriptions like that, you can tell they thoroughly went through and were thoughtful about, do we meet each of these areas? Do we meet each of these criteria? You know, it stands up to questioning. When you ask them questions back, they give you reasonable answers back that make sense. You know, they have clear descriptions of their products. They talk specifically about what tools they use to test. You know, you can tell by looking at it after you've looked at a couple ones. It's just like if you're an English teacher, you can tell if there's a really good paper or a really poor paper sometimes right after the first couple sentences or just even scanning. You can tell, you know, that something's off or it's not as thorough as it could be. And then who can help me on campus with VPAT or ACR questions? So it comes down to accessibility, and a lot of these different offices are responsible for accessibility on campus or some component to accessibility. So depending on what your product is, you know, if it's something that has to integrate with Brightspace, for example, or as an instructional learning tool, you know, Donna in online learning might be a perfect person to ask a question about. If it's something that's really, you know, a main software program, you have some questions, myself or OIT can answer that. If it's a web-based product that we might be also kind of putting up on our web, possibly Ryan, who works on our website, might be a good person to ask about with that. So there's a couple different people on campus, so don't feel like you're on your own. And we're going to provide more trainings as well and have examples of good VPATs, bad VPATs, but it's something where, you know, take a look at it, come to us with questions of like, you know, these sections, what do I need to know or what should I be looking at with? And there is support here on campus for VPAT. So you're not on your own, but that's something that if you at least know to ask for it, you're already halfway there. And that's where I'd like to see us get, is asking for it. And then let's learn as we go. And as we ask for those VPATs, we learn as a campus community how to evaluate and take a look at those. So some other further resources that are here, like I mentioned at the beginning, is our DQ University trainings, have VPAT information, have information on Section 508 and WCAG and kind of what all those categories are. So if you want to delve deep into it and kind of learn about that, it's another great resource. Accessibilityoz.com, which is the third bullet there, is where a lot of the information from my presentations from, and it's they have a lot of information on their site, and I went through one of their trainings in the fall semester, so they really put it into good terms there as well. And then the last one there is sinclair.edu, and that's an actual college that has a recommendation on, you know, during purchasing, requesting a VPAT and evaluating it. So that's something we'll look at developing here for NCCC, but that's an example of an actual college and their procurement process and their recommendations for VPATs. So That was our nice quick training. We're hitting the 1 o'clock mark. So I was just going to ask if anyone has any questions before we go. I do appreciate ahead of time everybody attending that did attend. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's super technical, so until you have something in front of you, it's hard to ask. But John, did you have any, or Glory have any follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Glory. Okay, well, I'm going to press stop on the recording.